On today's episode of Locked On Wild, so day-to-day continues for Kirill Kaprizov.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is going to take a look at a frustrating game. It was just one of those games last night against the Ottawa Senators that just gets under your skin. A 3-1 loss to the Sens. We'll talk about why it was so irritating. We'll take a look at Matt Boldy's continued cold spell. And we'll also talk about Kirill Kaprizov, who has now missed 2 games after being diagnosed as banged up. And day-to-day now becomes multiple days. So we'll talk about all that here today. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, joined by Alex Micheletti. And Alex, no victory Micheletti Monday, at least on the Wild side of things. And maybe the game against the Senators last night was so frustrating considering what the Minnesota Vikings did to the Green Bay Packers. And make no mistake about it, I know the final score ended up being a 2-point game, but that was a beatdown by all intents and purposes. If not for a Sam Darnold interception that leads to a Green Bay score, that's a they walked them up and down the field in that one. So maybe that's why the Senators game was so frustrating for me. Like, I have really tried to be even keel, pretty calm about what has happened so far this season. That game last night just irritated me because you were going up against not Linus Ullmark. You're going up against the Senators team that was playing on the second night of a back-to-back, and you get thoroughly dominated for about 2/3 of the game. The second period in particular, the Wild didn't have a shot on goal until about 7.5 minutes in. You're playing a Senators team that blew a lead to the Winnipeg Jets on the first night of the back-to-back, and they thoroughly outplayed the Minnesota Wild for large stretches of this game. It leads to a 3-1 loss for the Wild against the Senators. And so I don't know, maybe I'm reacting so strongly just because this one kind of just got under my skin a little bit. But I don't know, like it's a Senators team that's playing much better hockey, but that was an incredibly winnable game that the Wild just did not really get up off the mat floor until it was too late.
Yeah, I mean, they're going up against a minor league goalie, right? It's like that can't happen, especially not only, like you said, it's on a back-to-back, but to play an AHL goalie and to only score 1 goal at home, that it's flat out embarrassing. And this team has a lot of passengers right now. I know there's some key injuries, but, you know, this is where you have to, you know, when you're given the opportunity to step up and you're not doing it, it's, you know, it's not good.
Yeah, I'm going to get into the numbers here because I feel like maybe I am being a little too harsh, but then I read some of the stuff that Michael Russo wrote after the game. No, I think everybody is pretty equally frustrated by what took place at the hands of the Minnesota Wild, and it was a game in which the Wild led. Declan Chisholm scores the first goal of the game, and you come out in the second period, and you may have been able to have a better opportunity trying to get shots on goal had you simply crawled around on the ice. Like, it just was. And then in the third period, like you give up the game-tying goal, and then you take back-to-back penalties in the third period with time winding down. Zach Bogosian goes in for 2. You kill that penalty off, and Jared Spurgeon, 2 seconds after that penalty is done, goes to the box himself. And guess what? Senators score on that one, and it ends up being the difference. Like, it's the self-inflicted mistakes. It's the turnovers which we're gonna talk about Matt Boldy again here in a second because
Got empty netter.
and I'm just gonna say it right now. It was a stupid thing for me to do. It was a stupid, idiotic thing for me to do to kind of feed into that and kind of get up in my feelings on Twitter. I stand by saying that Matt Boldy's play has not been good for well over a month. We're going to look into the numbers. Does that mean that he should be traded? No, it doesn't. And so it was stupid for me to feed into just feeling angry about a game. So that's on me. That's my bad. But I stand by the fact that he is the number 2 option on this team until otherwise proven by somebody else being added or by somebody else stepping into that role. And you have 2 goals in the last 18 games for Boldy. He's being paid to be the second option on this team. 2 goals in 18 games is not good enough. And it's not only the lack of goals, because we've talked about how you can impact a game without scoring. It's the turnovers. It's just throwing the puck into the middle of the ice with no plan as to where it's going. He may as well have skated up to Claude Giroux last night and just handed him the puck for the empty netter. It's those types of things. It's the penalties. The play overall for Matt Boldy has to be better.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about those penalties. It's because of lazy play out there. That's what's causing the penalties. And yeah, you get out of the flow of your game, and that just can't happen. Like you said, with this team, you know, he's supposed to be the number 2 option behind Kaprizov, and then when Kaprizov doesn't play, they're looking at him to score, and he's not doing it. That's not good, because you have all these guys that they don't contribute anything to the game right now. Ryan Hartman, a guy that got an extension. Foligno started to contribute a little bit now here, which is good. But there's just so many guys that aren't doing anything out there, and yeah, it's frustrating. And you're not relying on Zuccarello to score goals. He's getting paid a ton of money, but he's more of a setup guy. And so it's where's Marcus Johansson? It's just so frustrating.
I want to read an excerpt from what Russo wrote from last night's game. It's always going to be tough without Kaprizov. And by the way, we'll talk about Kirill later, because now we just have, much like the Philip Gustafsson situation, much like all of the injury situations this year, we just have a complete fog. It was so foggy in Mankato yesterday that you could barely see in front of the car, maybe a foot or two. That's about the level of idea we have about where Kirill Kaprizov's at right now. And I'm not going to lie, it's starting to just get a little weird. Now, with my luck, later today we'll find out that he's fine. Just needed a couple of days to kind of rest up, but it's a little concerning that he's banged up. It's a new injury, and he's day to day. Has now cost 2 games.
Yeah, it wasn't just one game. Now it's multiple, and this team all year has just been so vague with injuries. I don't understand it. I know hockey's a little bit different than other sports, but just give us some more honesty. I think everybody would appreciate that, especially the journalists covering the team too, because then they have to write, and they're like, we don't even know. They have to speculate, which is never great.
Yeah, we'll go to oh my God, I just read a Bill Guerin quote in this Russo article about the Kaprizov situation. We're gonna get to that later, because I don't like how that sounds. I guess I'm appreciative that they're taking the cautious approach right now, but yeah, we're going to talk about that later. I want to get to this quote though, or this excerpt about the performance of the Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello line from last night. Russo writes, they were largely responsible for Ridley Gregg's second period tying goal with a long D-zone shift that started with their offensive zone turnover and spent a lot of the night running around in their own end. According to Natural Stat Trick, the trio was on the ice for 8 high-danger chances against versus 1 for themselves. The Corsi numbers are downright ugly. At 5-on-5, Zuccarello was on the ice for 25 shot attempts against. Think about that. 25 shot attempts against versus 11 for. Boldy, 23 shots attempts against versus 10 for. And Rossi, 25 shot attempts against versus 10 for. Boldy did hit the post and the crossbar, plus Zuccarello hit the post on a power play, but they were too cute, too east-west, and too feeble. That's the sentence right there. And then Boldy continues to struggle compared to his strong start to the season. He has 2 goals in his past 18 games and was a turnover machine once again Sunday. The one that led to Claude Giroux's empty netter, was just his last of many.
And especially on the one to Giroux, he had it once and gave up the puck, and then it came back to him, and then he gave it again. And I mean, Giroux, I'm sure that's the easiest goal he's scored in his life. That was it's just so frustrating, especially when you have that man advantage with the goalie pulled against a team that should be tired, and you gift wrap them an empty netter. That can't happen at home. And it's nice that they've banked some points here, but they can't fall into this just fog like we talked about. And it's not good.
And we're going to talk about it more after the break, but it is looking like something it's looking like something similar to what we saw last season with more heart, is the way that I'll phrase it. And with less, the team has not cratered like last year's team did. Mm-hmm. But we got to talk more, because I want to have a conversation about this topic, this question that has been in my mind since I was getting rightfully ethered on Twitter by many Wild fans. Is it fair to put it all on Matt Boldy, or do other players need to just show way more than they have in the scoring department? So we're going to talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Guilty as charged. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Hey, guess what? When I was on the job hunt, I had a couple of different services that I subscribed to try to help make that possible. Completely forgot to unsubscribe from them now that the job hunt is done. Thank you, Rocket Money, for making that something that now I do not have to worry about. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, tonight we will have a live show for you at 8. Denny's internet hopefully back up and running right as we were getting ready to go yesterday. Just lost it. But we'll have you covered at 8 p.m. tonight, and there's a lot to talk about. So make sure to tune in on YouTube, and we'll have a good time with it at 8 p.m. tonight. Alex, let's dive into this question that I posed before the break, because I think it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. Is it fair to lay it all on the top guy on the list for this Minnesota Wild team? And that falls to Matt Boldy when Kirill Kaprizov's not in the lineup. Or do we need to take a look at some of the other production numbers that frankly are just like, it's crazy to talk about some of these. Brock Faber has more goals right now over the last 18 games than Marcus Johansson, Marcus Foligno, Matt Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson. He's tied with Freddie Gaudreau, more than Yakov Trenyan, more than Marat Huznadinov, more than Ryan Hartman. On and on and on and on and on. And I know some of these guys are not paid to be goal scorers, but some of these guys are playing in prominent spots in the lineup and are just not giving you a thing. Another excerpt from Russo. He talks about Ryan Hartman's stretch right now. Ryan Hartman's funk continues. He couldn't score on 5 shots. His 49 shots since November 19th is by far the most in the NHL without a goal. He now has no goals in his past 19 games and no points in his past 18 games.
Like you first mentioned, it's real tough when a defenseman is outscoring some of these forwards. I don't know what's going on with Ryan Hartman too. They need him to help, and I get it. He's probably gripping the stick, but you have to start contributing, because if this team does get into the playoffs and they want to win in the first round, you're going to need depth scoring, and it's not showing right now. So how is that going to change come playoff time, where the scoring goes down for further compared to the regular season? And if they're not scoring right now, that could be a quick exit if they don't get things turned around here.
Yeah, and I just in instances like last night's game where you've got shots that hit the post, that's one thing, right. An inch, and maybe you're able to tuck one in. But it's just these stretches of play in which you're just really not generating anything. Like, you can't score goals if you can't get the puck out of your own end. And you know what is a huge contributor to that is all these turnovers. Like, all of this just, it's beyond careless with the puck. It is like you are essentially tossing one to the fans. Like, you would be better served just throwing the puck into the stands and taking the penalty than just handing it to the other team when they're in the offensive zone, because you just finished stopping a rush. And then instead of just taking the extra split second to make a conscious decision as to where it's going, you just try to play YOLO ball with it, and you throw it right to the top of the zone. And guess what? You're likely going to encounter players coming into the offensive zone fresh off the bench, and they catch you before you can get back to the bench to get fresh skaters on your own end.
They literally had all the advantages last night for them to win that game. You get last change, and you're at home. The Senators had to fly into St. Paul on the back end of a back-to-back. They're playing a minor league goalie. They're counting it as a scheduled loss in their minds, and they still let them win because of those turnovers and the penalty kill. I know they had to kill a second one, but that's still, it's not stepping up to the plate. If you want to win that game, you have to kill that penalty.
It's just like you cannot, with how anemic the offense has been, with how anemic the scoring in general has been, you can't put yourself in any sort of a potential hole. You just can't. Like, you can't take consecutive penalties there because of what we have seen to this point in the season. If you kill off one, you have to consider that a major victory and say to yourself, okay, we can't go on the penalty kill again because the law of averages is going to come back to earth and we're going to likely give one up. And I don't care who is in net. Philip Gustafsson did what he has done all season, and he just continued to keep the team in the game. despite not being able to generate hardly anything. You have to play perfect hockey to even give yourself a chance to score like 2 goals.
It's crazy. The fact that they beat Dallas, that was unbelievable. I mean, the only reason why they won that game is Jake Ottinger went out of body. So that was they stole points there, and then they just they continued that type of play, for the majority of the game, like they did in Dallas, like they did at home last night. That second period, that was a game changer. They let Ottawa find their legs and just dominated. It didn't affect the score sheet, but you could just see that the tide, the momentum was shifting to the Ottawa team that was on that back-to-back. And Josh Norris hadn't been scoring for a while, and of course he plays the Wild and gets the game winner. Yeah, it's just how that's been happening for the Wild.
Yeah, and we look at the numbers again. Unblocked shot attempts for the Wild tonight was 43. 36 of them were low danger. They did get 3 high danger attempts and 4 medium, but they're just again they're not able to capitalize on these right in close. And that's that is just another thing you can't have. You don't generate enough of those opportunities to be able to miss X amount of times and not have it come back to bite you.
Yeah, and I don't know, this team, they're normally pretty good with the goalie pulled, but it's just another mistake by Boldy there. It just can't happen, and it's really tough because for it to happen at home too, and all these fans that are paying a lot of money for the Wild games, and to only put in one in the net, and you had a lead. The Wild had a lead, and you shouldn't. You have that momentum, and you're not chasing the game, and you just let that slip away. It's that's a tough one.
9-8-1 at home this season. And if you flipped the home and road record this year, wouldn't bat an eye being 13-3-3 at home and 9-8-1 at the road. Because if you can even go 500 on the road and just win your home games, that's what a lot of normal teams do.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy that they're only a game over 500 at home. That's just unacceptable for a building that normally, I mean, it's one of the best arenas in the league and the loudest, and that can't happen. And especially come playoff time too, if they, like we talked about earlier in the episode, if they want to exercise their demons and get out of the first round, you have to win at home. And right now they're it's 50-50. It's crazy.
Let's discuss the latest with Kirill Kaprizov. This Bill Guerin quote is a doozy. We're just gonna dive right into it. I'm not gonna beat around the bush at all. So we'll discuss Kirill Kaprizov's timetable for an estimated return when we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, we've got the live show for you coming up tonight, 8 p.m. here on YouTube, so make sure to tune in. There's a lot to discuss. Denny has some great stuff cooked up, so make sure to tune in for that coming up at 8 p.m. here this evening. Bill Guerin, and I quote, "He's going to be back when he's back, and I don't know when that is. It could be a couple of games from now. It's not real serious. It's just making sure things are okay for the long run." And maybe I'm reading too much into that, because at the end of the day, it is the right approach. Because if you try to push for points right now, and this leads to some sort of nagging injury that impacts Kaprizov in the playoffs, then you definitely made the wrong choice. But as Russo also says, there was no one incident that caused the injury. Kaprizov pushes so hard with his skating that over time he's been dealing with lingering soreness. It sounds like a minor groin strain.
Groins, we we don't need another groin type of
No.
injury, but that's always scary because he had that thanks to Logan Stanley in the past. So that's tough especially for a guy that relies so much on his his speed and his game. And so it's just scary. And like we talked about with the Wild, we never get the full truth on injury timelines.
Well, and it has been pretty much all season. Like one player comes back, somebody else gets hurt. And this would not be as big of a problem if there was somebody who could step in and consistently score goals. And there's nobody else on the roster that comes close to that.
Yeah, it's not great right now. And we almost saw two more injuries tonight. Brodin took off the hand, and
Faber
looked like he was a little shook up too. So it's like, oh my goodness, if they lose another defenseman, oof.
But it's like, again, all of these little things. Like if you were a team that had more scoring depth, as say the Dallas Stars,
right,
and Kirill Kaprizov has to be shut down for a couple of games to let this fully heal so it doesn't become a problem later on, you can handle that. You can navigate through that. If Kaprizov was on the Winnipeg Jets and he needed a couple of days to just, heal up and recover, you can manage that. You can mitigate that easy.
Yeah.
There's no scoring depth right now. Zero scoring depth.
Look at the Dallas Stars. They just lost Mason Marchment now, and they've lost Tyler Seguin. And their depth is showing up. Dadonov is playing really well now, and they just destroyed the Blackhawks last night. And so they find ways for their depth scoring to contribute. And if the season finished right now, they'd be playing Dallas in the first round, which could possibly be the opponent. That does not that does not look good for the Wild if that happens.
In the last 25 games since November 1st, Kirill Kaprizov has 18 goals and in 25 games. Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy have 9 each. The next closest to those three, so that's 36 goals between the three of them. The next closest to that in terms of goals is Freddie Gaudreau with 5.
That's not great when you mentioned Freddie in the goal scoring, because he's actually at least contributing, but it's just that is not good at all. And there's guys making a ton of money that aren't doing anything. They are becoming the new Cardio brothers. It's extremely frustrating, especially Ryan Hartman.
And I'm just going to keep repeating this because it just keeps being mentioned. Until some of these teams, like the New York Islanders, I know Brock Nelson has started to gain some steam. Obviously, Michael Russo is talking about that on KFan. It's been mentioned consistently here. Feels like Denny's kind of been leading the charge on that. And everybody else kind of followed suit. But even still, Lou Lamoriello does not have to do a GD thing until his team falls out of the playoffs. He does not have to even answer the phone.
He's one of the most.
You can't just rely. Like that's something that could be there available like down the road. You can't rely on that right now.
And you never know what Lou Lamoriello is going to do. Stuff never leaks out of where he is with his teams, and he kind of operates in the dark, and he might just end up just keeping Brock Nelson and hoping that they can give him an extension and once the season's over, keep negotiating. So you don't know. They're a very weird team. Always have been in this modern era.
I said the Buffalo Sabres. I was trying to manifest. That's clearly dead now because they've won 3 games in a row. So no Tage Thompson for those that were hoping some sort of a big, like, thinking down the road swing would happen. But to be fair, I also did say that there was really no likelihood of that ever happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fun kind of to dream big. I'm a big dreamer. But the point that I'm trying to get across to kind of bring us full circle here is that until such a trade happens to bring in somebody from outside that can help with the scoring, it's on this roster. It's on this collection of players to figure out how to get the puck into the net. And I'll go back to what we said last week, in fact, on last Monday's episode, is that you're going to have some nights like tonight, like last night, where you hit the post, you hit the crossbar, you come up, short of maybe getting 2 or 3 that change the outcome of this game. But there have been plenty of nights where you just do not generate hardly anything. And you can't rely on perimeter shots to win you games. You got to get to the net. You got to get in close and attack. And so I guess I would start there. I would start with trying to just crash the net and attack and seeing if that fixes things. But Russo's right on. There isn't enough. There needs to be less flash and sizzle and more just focusing on getting the puck in the net. Like, the East-West is very apt. There's just too much dancing around. Just go get the puck in the net, and some of this will subside. But over the last probably 3 weeks or so, it's still a team that is second in the division. Like, they're still one of the top points totals in the West, but the offense is really starting to cause problems for everything else. And it's starting to feel like you're losing a little bit of the hold on the rope trying to climb the mountain.
Yeah, 100%. And this team, they have a lot of grinders, and like you nailed it. They score a lot of their goals by right in front of the net, just grinding for off rebounds. That's how Joel Eriksson-Ek has earned his money, as being right out front. And hopefully he can get back up to full speed. It looked like he had some type of leg injury, and so those can be frustrating to get back to completely 100% normal. So we'll see if he's goes on a little stretch here once he's completely healthy. His first game back, it's tough, but he's so important to this team to be 100% healthy, because they need somebody to help out on that second line. And when he's out of the lineup, it completely nukes any scoring from that second line.
Yeah, look, again, really have tried all season to err on the side of rational logic and not jumping to conclusions. But that game last night really, really annoyed me, really irritated me. And I think it's indicative of something that's been a problem here for more than just like a couple of games. So if you want to fix some of those problems, start getting the puck in the net more consistently. That's all I'm saying. There's no need to rush to trade anybody, dump anybody off the roster. Again, probably idiotic to go on Twitter and to throw some of that stuff out there. But again, a guy getting paid $7 million to be your number 2 option has to be better. That's the takeaway here. That's the takeaway from last night's game. Is it has to be better. So we hear Bill Guerin say it a lot. He's not wrong. That's a pretty simple way to surmise it. It has to be better. So we'll see if it is on Tuesday against the Nashville Predators, and hopefully we're all ringing in 2025 on a better note than a game that it felt like was just squandered against an AHL goalie. But that's how it goes. That'll do it for today's show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. As always, again, make sure to join us for the live show tonight, 8 p.m. on YouTube. And make sure to hit that like button if you have not already. We'll catch you for the next one. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.